Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums. Today we're going to look at the catalog of a very cool band from San Francisco here in the US of A. They've got 8 studio albums. They got their start in the late 80s, very late 80s, when they were called Mayday. They changed their name at the beginning of the 90s to Enchant. And like I said, 8 studio albums. But we haven't seen anything from them quite a while. They were pretty busy throughout the 90s, but then once the 2000s started on, a lot of inactivity. Lead singer actually wound up joining another very prominent prog band. They released their last studio album to date in 2014. There was a long gap between that one and the one before that. So what the future holds for Enchant, I really don't know at this point. Ted Leonard, of course, is the lead singer for Spock's Beard, has been for a number of years now. So don't really know where that leaves Enchant. But we're going to take a look at their catalog. Like I said, 8 full-length studio albums. I'm going to start with my least favorite and go all the way to my favorite. Before I do that, though, let's talk a little bit about the band itself. So Doug Ott, founding member on guitars, backing vocals, keyboards, bass, right? Did a little lead vocals early on, but mostly backing vocalist. Ted Leonard, of course, lead singer, occasionally playing some guitars or bass or keyboards. Another guy who joined the band very, very early on. Ed Platt on bass. Sean Flanagan on drums. Bill Jenkins, keyboards, backing vocals. And you got former members, Paul Craddock, of course, their original founding drummer. Also played some keyboards, bass, and guitars in the band. He was a full-time member of the band, founding member up till 2002. Mike Giemer on keyboards, founding member. He left the band in 2000. Brian Klein, very early member of the band, bass, lead, and backing vocals. And Phil Bennett, keyboard player from 2000 to 2002. So, like I said, originally they were called Mayday. Changed their name to Enchant. So we're going to start with my number 8, right? So I have all of them in hard copy CD except for one of the albums. And I'll mention that when we get to it. But starting at number 8, I'm going to go with their 6th album from 2002, which is Blink of an Eye. This is on Inside Out Music. They spent a good chunk of their career on Inside Out Music. They spent a little bit of time on Magna Carta Records also. Magna Carta, of course, very prominent in the early mid-90s as this new upstart label that featured a lot of prog and prog metal bands, and then Inside Out became like the big-time prog label the mid-late 90s and still continued to this day. So back to Blink of an Eye. So here we have Phil Bennett joins on keyboards on this album. Sean Flanagan replaces Paul Craddock, founding member, on drums. Here we have Ed Platt back in the band on bass because he had left for a little bit. Of course, joining Ted Leonard on vocals and Doug Ott on guitar. Doug Ott actually plays guitars, keyboards, some bass, and produces the album. So here you have Under Fire, strong mid-pace cruncher to kind of open up the album. I think, again, throughout much of their career, you hear little bits of Kansas in their music. Just to let you know, Enchant, prog rock, progressive metal, neo-progressive rock, kind of the terms thrown around to describe this band. They don't really fit into any of the categories very neatly because I think their music is not quite heavy enough to be called progressive metal. It's a little at times too rockin' to be called straight prog rock. It's also at times not as kind of complex as regular prog rock or prog metal. It's kind of symphonic, but not overly so. There's lots of hooks and things like that, so there's kind of like this little melodic rock and hard rock thing going on there as well. So they don't really fit into any bucket very, very cleanly, I think, is one of the issues that a lot of people always had with Enchant. Their music is kind of different. You hear lots of similarities to other bands. If you kind of like that kind of, think of Kansas at their most non-prog, more like kind of melodic rock, hard rock, arena rock, certainly Saga, right? Saga, often labeled as a prog band, although very, very accessible. 80s Rush. Going to hear me talk about 80s Rush quite a bit, talking about the Enchant catalog. And on their heavier moments, there's little bits of Dream Theater, but it never gets as showy as that, okay? So again, Under Fire, good song to start off the album. Ted Leonard, occasionally does sound like a very young Steve Walsh. He does on this album quite a bit. You got the song Monday on here, very memorable melodic rocker. Seeds of Hate, more of a heavy track. I like that one. Flatline's another one, which feels more like a typical progressive metal track with the big aggressive guitars, the more complicated passages and things like that. But always very, very melodic in typical Enchant fashion. I think Ted's vocals on this whole album and throughout this whole catalog are outstanding. I don't really care much for the bland Follow the Sun, but then you get a song like The Ultimate Gift, which reminds me of Kansas. The rest of the album is kind of somewhat hit or miss. I think I like Invisible, which has some kind of different things going on. The arrangement's a little bit different, not that typical of Enchant, especially the guitar textures and the kind of keyboard tones. But overall, I think this is a solid but uneven album, and I kind of get the feeling when I listen to this album, and maybe even a couple of these albums, that the band are really kind of unsure what direction to go in. You know, like, what are we exactly, right? It's like their music is always very enjoyable. These albums are all really solid. There's not a clunker in this whole catalog. But then again, are any of these albums really classic, right? I don't know. I know there's albums I like more than some of the others, right? But I think most of the albums they're a little uneven. Some of them are a little on the longish side, right? Of course, most of them we're talking about in the 90s when most bands were doing 60, 70-minute long albums, right? So I think it's one of those bands that like have like a couple of really, really strong albums. And then the rest of the catalog is good. Maybe not great, but there's lots of really great songs on them, right? It's like I think if you take all the best of Enchant, you have a almost unbeatable long double album, right? And maybe that's being a little harsh because I really do like these guys, but I think that over the course of their career, I've always felt like I wanted a little something else from them. You know, like some of the albums feel a little safe to me, but they're still really enjoyable. And like I said, most of these albums I bought when they first came out, and in getting ready to do the show again, I've been revisiting these albums. And even like today, recording this show, well, you're watching on Sunday, I recorded it on Saturday. I spent a good chunk of the day re-listening to them yet again to make sure that I kind of had my ranking correct. And I walked away thinking, I'm like, it's like my opinion of this band and these albums hasn't changed all that much. It's a really good catalog, and I would urge anybody who hasn't listened to Enchant to check them out. But I just feel like they kind of never really found their niche, sort of. There's lots to enjoy here, but then a lot of the albums kind of sound very similar to me. Like they never really went for it and took some serious chances. I think that's kind of what I'm really looking to say about this band. But it's a really good catalog. So, all right, next up we're going to go to the one that I do not have, which is their last album from 2014, last one we've seen. Whether it be their final one, I don't know. It's called The Great Divide. All right, and it's also on Inside Out Music. It's the second album in a row actually with the same exact lineup. So it actually comes 11 years after their Tug of War album, which I'll get to in a couple minutes. So you have the song Circles, which is pretty catchy. It's got some nice soloing on the guitar and keys. Ted Leonard singing great. He's a really, really good singer. I've always liked his voice. You have Within an Inch, more muscular, but also filled with hooks. All their albums and songs have lots of nice hooks. You got the 8-minute title track, which has bits of 80s Rush and Brilliant and Kansas and Dream Theater and Yes. It's a really cool and memorable epic, a little longer track. You got All Mixed Up. It's got some heavier dirge-like guitar riffs. Again, they were never really all that heavy a band, but they do have some heaviness to plenty of their songs. Catchy chorus in this one. You got Life in a Shadow, another accessible song, big and vibrant, lots of hooks. Doesn't sound all that much different than more modern-day Spock's Beard. Again, that has a lot to do with Ted's voice, but you know, Enchant toured a bit with Spock's Beard over the years, so not surprising that some of that would rub off on them, I guess. Deserve to Feel, another good prog rock song. I'd say on this album, you know, considering it was 11 years since the one before, a couple of tracks aren't all that memorable, but for the most part, this was a pretty good return to form for them after being away for, you know, not producing an album for 11 years. And again, no idea where the future holds for this band. With Ted firmly in Spock's Beard, but I guess we'll wait and see, you know. Never say never, because it was a long time between The Great Divide and the one before it, right? So maybe we'll see something else from them at some point. So, but that remains to be seen. All right, next up, we're going to go to 1998's Break. This is their fourth album, Inside Out Music once again. So here you've got Ed Platt, their original bass player, no longer playing bass on this one. This is mostly played, the bass is mostly played by the rest of the band. It's another solid album, though. To me, the formula, by this their fourth album, the formula seems to be wearing slightly thin. There's a real sameness that goes throughout much of the tracks on this album. And I kind of wonder, like a band whose lineup is kind of in transition, maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. Most of the songs are kind of like these moody, mid-paced numbers. It's not overly heavy. It's not overly progressive. But there's still some good stuff on here. Ted, again, sounds good. My Enemy is a great example of his voice just kind of soaring over the top of these really kind of dramatic, moody arrangements. I dig that. The title track is really catchy. King is also a really good song. The Lizard, again, reminds me of 80s Rush. We're going to talk, like I said, we're going to talk a lot about that coming up fairly soon. There's nice crisp views of guitars and keyboards. There's a catchy chorus on In the Dark. My Gavel Hand is fairly heavy. Overall, I think it's a solid album. It's one of those albums by them I want to love it, but I've never quite gotten there. I figure it's early enough in the catalog. I really want to like it more. Like I said, there's kind of a sameness going on throughout it, but there are some really good tracks on here. So overall, it's a solid record. Solid record. That's number 6. Number 5, we're going to go with Tug of War from 2003. So again, this is the last one they did before the big long break. 7th album, also Inside Out Music. Here, Bill Jenkins joins on keyboards, replacing Phil Bennett. You got Sinking Sand, not Silking Sand. A really good opener. More of a straightforward rocker, though, right? Again, there's lots of that stuff in this catalog as a band who always kind of, and maybe the label always pushed them as a prog band. There's a lot of like just straight ahead kind of rock, melodic rock stuff. Again, kind of like Saga, right? Maybe not overly progressive, but with little touches here and there. Nice guitar tones from Doug Ott. Really good player here. The title track is a big, boisterous, kind of metalish romp. It's kind of heavy, catchy chorus. Almost sounds like Saga meets Kansas. You got the melodic Hold the Wind, Queen of the Informed, high quality, Dream Theater style prog metal. They do dip their hat into that every so often, but again, not as showy, not as many solos and things like that. Living in a Movie, mid-pace slow builder, simmers and boils a little bit. Nice vocal from Ted once again. Proctology, killer instrumental from the band. They would do a few instrumentals here and there in their catalog. And I love Ted Leonard. Really good singer. Perfect for this band. But man, when these guys like really let loose and do like a real prog metal furious instrumental, you just wonder why they never did more of that, because they're really, really good at it. And then you got a song called Comatose, which it's pretty lengthy. It's kind of lush and melodic. Some nice guitar solos and keyboards. I think it's a really solid album. A little bit of filler. It's kind of long, but some excellent material on here as well. I would recommend Tug of War. Very cool stuff. Comes in at number 5. Number 4. For me, the top 4 are really the cream of the crop here. If you were going to investigate this catalog for the first time, I would say investigate any of the top 4 albums. For me, they're kind of head and shoulders above the others. The others are good too, but these are really strong. Number 4, I'm going to go with their 5th album from 2000. Juggling 9 or Dropping 10. Very cool album cover, by the way, too. Also on Inside Out Music. Here, so in the lineup, Ed Platt appears to be back in the band. At least they list him as being back in the band. However, he plays bass on only one song on here. And again, the lineup is kind of in transition, right? So you got Mike Giemer only appears on one song on keyboards. Most of the keyboards are actually played by Paul Craddock, the drummer, and guitarist Tug Ott, who the two of them seem to be doing most of everything on here except for the vocals from Ted Leonard. So it's kind of one of those weird albums where the lineup is in flux, but the material is really good. The opening song, Paint the Picture, has this opening keyboard guitar passage thing going on. Once you listen to it, you'll know exactly what it sounds like. It's straight out of the 70s Rush playbook. It's basically stolen from Xanadu. The whole intro to the song, that's what it is. And you'll do a double take and you're like, holy crap. So everybody's talking about the Crown Lands these days, right? Who just released their new album that sounds, this one right here, that sounds just like 70s Rush. Well, you get a little bit of that right here as well. And you get some 80s Rush, a lot of it, on some of these Enchant albums. But yeah, so that song is called Paint the Picture. Go check it out. Paint the Picture from Enchant. Let me know if you think that does not sound like Xanadu from Rush. But really good song. Rough Draft. Got some great hook-laden vocal harmonies. A little heavier guitar edge. It seems like the band has put some balls back into this album, which I kind of like. You get the melodic textures on What to Say. Big bright anthem, Bite My Tongue. It's a real belter. I like that one a lot. Great chorus on that. You got the catchy rocker Colors Fade. You get some interesting kind of funky grooves on the heavy prog of Juggling Knives, which is kind of a little different for them, but I really like it. Paul Craddock's drums are excellent throughout this whole album, really. He's a really good drummer. And you get some nice acoustic tones which complement the otherwise pretty heavy track Black Eyes and Broken Glass. And then you got a song called Elise, which has more kind of 80s Rush sounds. And I'm talking, maybe Signals through Presto, right? Pretty much. What else? Traces, another big moody epic from them. Another really good song. Overall, really strong album. Might have benefited by a little bit amount of trimming. It's over an hour long, maybe 5-10 minutes could have been cut off of this, make it a little bit tighter album. But overall, I love the production. There's some really, really excellent songs on here, and the playing is really, really good. So Juggling 9 or Dropping 10 from 2000 comes in at number 4 for me. Coming in at number 3, we're going to go with their second album. This one was on Magna Carta Records from 1996. It's called Wounded. There they are in shadow right there. Slightly heavier album than their debut. More of a Dream Theater influence on this band. I think they opened up for Dream Theater not too long before this album, or somewhere around there. So, but Dream Theater in 1996, Dream Theater already kind of broken a little bit big. So a lot of bands on Magna Carta, certainly the label, were very, very highly influenced from Dream Theater. So, Shadow Gallery and Magellan and Enchant and the whole bunch of other Cairo, a whole bunch of other ones. So it's not uncommon to think that a lot of them kind of were probably pushed into that direction a little bit, or just gravitated towards it. But here you have Below Zero. It's a really potent opener, lots of complex riffs and rhythms. You got the riff-heavy Fade to Gray, which has a real catchy chorus. You got the more laid-back Pure, which is kind of like a pop prog song that wouldn't have sounded out of place on like a 90s Marillion album with Steve Hogarth singing. Great vocals from Ted Leonard on that one, on the slower one. He can do all sorts of different things. You got lots of different layers and textures on Broken. You got the heavy Hostile World, which has some excellent guitar work from Doug Ott. Might be my favorite song on the album. Look Away, again, sounds like 90s Marillion. You get this big anthemic chorus on the otherwise excellent prog rocker Armor. There's Distractions, which is more of a moody, slow builder with a scorching guitar solo from Ott. And then you get the closer, Missing, which is a heavy prog metal burner with a strong Dream Theater feel. Again, like I said, they do dip into that style from time to time on the early albums. It's a long album, all songs between 6 and 9 minutes, and maybe it's not quite as immediate as their debut, but I think it's a really, really strong album in their catalog if you want the kind of heavier side of Enchant. So that's Wounded, second album from 1996. Coming in at number 2, going to go with their third album from 97, which is called Time Lost. So this was kind of an interesting release for them because it was a kind of 60% new songs, 40% unused, unreleased tracks from earlier in their career, right? So kind of a stopgap album before their next full length. But because most of it is, new songs, we all basically counted it as a brand new album from the band, even though maybe they didn't think so at the time. Although I was never a fan of the blurry album cover. I don't know what the hell they were thinking of here. That's just ridiculously bad. So this one here goes further into the Dream Theater territory for the most part. Blindsided opens things up. It's got some crushing riffs from Doug Ott. Paul Craddock's acrobatic drums are just absolutely incredible on this one. Ted Leonard just sounding really, really forceful and just really energetic on this album, especially the first track. Really, really good stuff. You got haunting keyboards on the song. Great, great opener. It's heavy. It's progressive. It's dramatic. Absolutely love it. You get more straightforward kind of melodic prog blended with hard rock on New Moon. Very good, catchy song. You got the darker Under the Sun, which has another great vocal, chilling guitars, chilling keyboards. Interact is near 11 minutes of Rush meets Dream Theater. Absolutely love that song. Really, really good stuff. Standing Ground is the shortest song on here. It's just over 5 minutes long, but it's a good one. It's kind of like a mid-paced prog number, good hook on it. And then you have the killer instrumental Metal Man, Mettle, which closes out the album. Big, bright keyboards, loads of churning guitars, another winner of a song. And again, when these guys do an instrumental, it's really, really well done. I'm surprised they didn't do more of that. So, for me, the band busts out of the gate with 3 outstanding albums in a row, which is really, really cool. So this is a really good one. It's my number 2. And my number 1, had to go with the debut. A Blueprint of the World from 1993. All right. Stephen Rothery from Marillion produced half of the album, or most of it, I should say. Originally released on Dream Circle Records, later reissued on Magna Carta Records. Highly melodic progressive rock with some metal overtones, crisp guitar work, higher pitched vocals of Ted Leonard. He's a little early in their career. He had more of a higher thing going on. You get layers of keys from Mike Giemer, really excellent drumming and bass on it. To me, like this album especially, sounds so much like a combination of, like I mentioned, 80s Rush, those albums I talked about, Signals to Presto, specifically like Signals, Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows, that era, Rush, with like early 80s Saga, right? So you get the semi-muscular guitars at times, but mostly it's, I think more I'm reminded of Saga in the accessibility and hookiness of the songs, as opposed to, I think, the guitar tones of Doug Ott are more in line with what Alex Lifeson was doing in the 80s. Again, not big, distorted, chunky, crunchy riffs, more kind of like clean, effects-laden guitar stuff, very crisp sounding, which if you like that style, that's kind of what you get here. But the songs are definitely a little more progressive than like what Rush was doing at the time. A little bit longer, a little bit more intricate stuff happening. The Thirst, it's the first song on here. Absolutely terrific song. Great hooks. You got the haunting and brooding catharsis. You get the big upbeat Oasis, which sounds like a heavier Marillion. And I'm talking Fish era Marillion. You got the more prog metal leanings of At Death's Door. You got the gorgeous, majestic Enchanted, which has some lovely keyboards. Big guitar riffs. Excellent song. You got the powerful Open Eyes. You got the tasty instrumental Mayday, okay, which is using the name of their Maedae. They're going back, that's what their original band name was. Another good instrumental. You got the big epic Nighttime Sky, very melodic, lots of twists and turns, take the listener all sorts of different places. Very good song. Great vocal harmonies throughout the whole album. Really strong debut. Really kind of cool and different album cover, I always thought too. So that is my number 1. Okay. So Blueprint of the World, number 1. Time Lost, number 2. Wounded, number 3. Juggling 9 or Dropping 10, number 4. Tug of War, number 5. Break, number 6. Number 7, we're going to go with their final album, Great Divide. And number 8, Blink of an Eye. Like I said, there's no clunkers at all in this catalog. It's just that I think that, a few of the albums are really good, not quite great. And a couple of their albums are pretty close to greatness, I think, right? So that's kind of what you get. Like I said, if you're new to the band, I would highly recommend my first 4 that I mentioned, the top 4. Those are the ones I think that truly are their strongest albums, and there's plenty of great material on there. The bottom half of the list, there's lots of good material on there. There's also some songs that just don't really do a hell of a lot for me, but they're not bad. No bad albums here, but some are better than others with a lot of catalogs, right? So if you are a fan of the band, Let us know how you would rank this catalog, all 8 studio albums. And if you've never heard these guys before, go investigate a couple of these albums, and after you've heard them, come back into the comments section and let us know what you thought of some of them, okay? So that's our ranking for today. Stay tuned 1 week from today for another Ranking the Albums episode. We are trying to get, I don't know if it's going to be next week or not. I know he and I have talked about it. Chris Sallow and I are planning on ranking the Danzig catalog. I'm not sure we'd like to do that before the end of the month. It'll either be next weekend or the weekend after that. So however that works out, if it's not next weekend, I'll get you another one in between now and then. I've got a whole bunch of other ones that I'm working on. So more information to come in the coming days, all right? But stay tuned 1 week from today for another album of Ranking the Albums, which happens every Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Sea of Tranquility. And visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. Nuka can't wait for this episode to run. She's like all excited about Enchant. So please do hit the like button before you leave. And down below, we've also got the links to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, as well as our merch page. So thanks for watching, everybody. I am Pete Pardo. Stay tuned for more stuff here on the channel, and tune in Tuesday for In the Prog Seat. Speaking of Rush, we are doing another album study, and this coming Tuesday, it's all about Grace Under Pressure from Rush, and that will be hosted by Chad Hutchinson. It's his album pick, so we've been studying it, talking about it, and we're bringing it to you on Tuesday. So stay tuned for that, and lots more here on Sea of Tranquility. Till then, have a good rest of the weekend, everybody. I am Pete Pardo. Take care. Bye-bye.